So hi everyone, welcome to the Fashion Clinic's second live panel discussion in 2021. I am Isadora, I will be hosting the event tonight, and my co-host Margot is a fellow Fashion Clinic member. A little brief introduction to the Fashion Clinic. So the Fashion Clinic is an exciting hub for those interested and involved in the fashion industry. We are connecting everyone from aspiring entrepreneurs to industry professionals, and we approach fashion from a holistic point of view. So our main goal is to facilitate conversation and to help each other in our community grow, exchange knowledge, and mainly make connections. So a little bit what we've already done, we've started this year off by creating the Fashion Clinic YouTube channel and a Spotify account. We have recorded numerous podcast series where we touch the topic on sustainability, fashion in a post-COVID world. We've discussed many innovative ideas, and we've also introduced a lot of young fashion entrepreneurs from around the world who are thriving with their curiosity and passions. And now we've decided that it's time for our community to meet in person and really exchange ideas. So we want to encourage you that you feel free to ask questions during the event, write them in the chat, or maybe raise your hand. And we want to hear your voices. We want to know who you are, what you're doing. So please join us in our conversation. We also have some very exciting guests tonight. Our goal was to discuss breaking in the boundaries of business modeling in the fashion industry, in particularly focusing on young creatives entering the fashion industry. Our panelists tonight are Claudio Marenco, Farah Liz Pallaro, and Habib Patel, and they all have experiences working with young creatives and are helping them shape their business ideas, helping them discover their creative identities, and mentoring them on their growth. And I would love to invite them to introduce themselves. And Claudio, do you feel comfortable breaking the ice?
Okay, I'll start that. Hi everybody, my name is Claudio Marenco. I'm from Italy. I'm an educator and a consultant. I studied architecture. I majored in architecture, but eventually I worked all my professional life in the fashion industry as a writer first, as a journalist, and then I moved on to products, and then ended up being merchandiser and product manager for like big projects like Calvin Klein collection, and then the Educator group for the brand Pucci. Throughout that period, I literally randomly ended up and casually ended up teaching, and now it's my main job since 2015. In this 15 years of teaching, I ended up also teaching, managing the department, being the head of the fashion department for an international fashion school. And now I'm collaborating with another international fashion school also. And I'm consulting young brands and young designers in the first steps in the industry, mostly with startups and mostly with young entrepreneurs.
Thank you. Habib?
I'll unmute. Okay. Great to meet you all out there in the ether. My name's Habib Patel. I'm a branding consultant. I own a company called Discover, and we create brands, but we also create experiences, whether it's a user experience or a physical experience, digital experience. We plan out, design, create, and deliver all of those. My background started with advertising agencies such as Ogilvy and Saatchi, and went on to pure branding agencies such as Interbrand, Landor, and Coley Portobello. And for the last 8 years, in one form or another, I've been running either a business in a partnership or my own business now with Discover. And most rewardingly, I have recently, over the last 2 or 3 years, been involved with the London College of Fashion Masters in Innovation and Entrepreneurship, fashion, of course, and that has been fantastic. It's been a really rewarding experience. One of the things I've learned is that giving back is really rewarding, And I should have started that process many years ago, because it's been a revelation. It's fantastic. That's me.
Thank you. And Farah, please tell us about yourself.
Thank you, Isadora. First of all, I love when you say that the Fashion Clinic has a holistic approach. That's the way to go in the fashion industry. My name is Farah Pallaro. As we discussed before, when we were introducing ourselves before the meeting, I studied law school, but I never worked as a lawyer. And then I started studying fashion design. I had my degree as fashion designer, and I started working as a fashion designer for luxury companies. And sorry, because I have all the light here, I look like suddenly the heavens open. So as I was saying, I started working as a fashion designer for luxury brands, fancy luxury brands. And at one point, as I mentioned to you before, guys, I was feeling a little bit that I didn't have a life. So I quit my perfect job on paper, and I opened my consultancy studio back in 2010, and I started doing consultancy for fashion brands, designers, and also different type of companies. And I started teaching by case, same as happened with Claudio, and I discovered mentoring. And this is why I decided to become a mentor. And in 2018, I published my first book, Fashion Business Spirituality. And my life changed again. So now I'm also, writing books. And as Habib says, trying to support as much possible those emerging designers, emerging brands. And it's a very, very rewarding thing, and something that I encourage all those fashion professionals out there with years of experience to give back to the new generations, because it's a beautiful profession, it's a beautiful job. So this is it. I'm going to close my curtains because I don't see you guys completely. Suddenly the sun.
Thank you for this introduction. So Margot can agree with me. When we were at the Fashion Clinic, when we were preparing the questions to start off with, we wanted to first focus on your experiences working with young creatives, and what kind of trends have you noticed that within their creative work? So what problems are young fashion creatives currently trying to solve?
I can jump in first. I'm a non-fashion person, so I'm kind of coming from a different angle. I'm coming from the branding area, and what I've loved about knowing know the breadth of projects, especially at LCF, is that there's a real kind of desire to be part of society rather than just a fashion brand. And I think that for me is a fantastic revelation. And if I was coming into that relationship fresh, I would have encouraged people to think in those terms. And it was great to see that it was already there. Of course, people are talking about sustainability. Of course, people are talking about waste and fast fashion and all of these really prescient issues. But it goes beyond the issues, and I think that's where I was really kind of heartened and felt very positive about the different projects and ideas that I came across. It goes beyond that. It's about finding a place in society and being useful to society. So if the 20th century was marked by commerce for commerce's sake, we're now in a century, I think, that would be defined by commerce for the sake, for the good of humanity, and for the good of the world, not just humanity. And that's what I'm beginning to kind of sense. So I wanted to, if I was to say, what am I finding about mentoring and building relationships within the fashion industry, is that I think there's a real desire, and that's incredibly inspiring. I think that's really, really great and worth expanding on.
Farah, do you want to go?
Yes, I totally agree with Habib. No, I always say this thing that the best business is the one good for you, good for the client, good for the world, right? And I think that is something that young talents and emerging entrepreneurs have very clear in mind. That I was saying this, discussing this with an editor the other day, and I was saying, look, I think the change eventually in the fashion industry is going to be led by this small, medium brands or small, medium companies, not, as far as I see it, not the big ones for sure. And I'm very hopeful to see this energy that this young talent have, and people that is not scared. Speaking with this editor, she was talking to me about this company. I forget the name of the company. I will check that and send them you after maybe. It's an agency that these three young ladies have created, and it's all about bringing well-being to the fashion industry. I would say yes, that's been my little crusade since years. The human as the pivotal point that sustains the whole, because as I always said, before products and services, there's people creating those products and services. So that those aspects should be priority, and I think the movement is versus that direction.
Can I be like a little, I have a slightly, like it goes in the same direction, but it's a slightly different perspective, I think. And especially, I do see a trend. I do see some definitely positive signs, as Habib and Farah are noticing, and that's so reassuring that maybe we planted some good seeds in a way. But also I see that in many institutions, in many, like, let's say even fashion design school, there's still like a pattern that is repeating, and it's very easy to be tricked in that pattern for young designers. I think that what I see, and it's positive, is that obviously it's meant for good, but it's some designers, they do have a systemic approach to fashion. They're not thinking fashion per fashion sake, as like only for fashion's sake, but they think fashion as a system. They think fashion as a process, and they apply the design thinking to the whole process, not just to the output. And that, I think, it's the positive sign that I start seeing. But the pace of the industry and also the demands of some schools, they do not align to that, which to me it's a big issue.
Would you say there is a difference with fashion design students trying to start their own businesses compared to students with a business background, the way they approach patterns in business modeling, and maybe is there a shift in thinking based on the experience that you have?
I think we're going to repeat a lot of times the word holistic, because it's like, to me, it means a systemic approach. It means that we're not only designing what it gets into the market, but we design how the people interact with that, how we source the materials, how we distribute that. We scale our businesses to the purpose and not just to the size, but this like limitless size that the industry gave us as a reference in the past. Like the bigger, the better. Like it's non-relevant for now. And I see the most amazing, at least in my small scenario of clients and even the students, the ones that scale their business organically are the ones, and they sort of manage. To me, there's no distinction between, like, it's not business or creativity. It's everything goes together. What I learned from my architecture background and architecture/industrial design background is that you need to design the whole process. And I think now I see that happening, and I try humbly to teach it to students also.
Thank you, Claudio, for mentioning your last point, because I wanted to ask you, fashion students are doing new things in old ways. And I wanted to ask you, what do you think is the root? It's the root problem of it.
It's a complication. It's very complicated. I think that the root problem is that the times have changed. Generations have different purposes, and I think your generation has like Gen Z and late millennials, definitely they show greater potential than previous generations, I would say, but you need to change the game. It's a game that's been designed by someone else. You cannot just apply your new value, like you better values to that game. Change it, disrupt it. I mean, I was talking to a client before today, and he was all like, oh, I need to present my goods in the showroom, and then the showroom. And I was showing him, I was trying to tell him that that's the wrong way. His business is not scaled to that. It doesn't need the usual pipeline. He can disrupt even the presentation of his goods. It can change, like he changed everything else, but he wanted to play the game of commerce as it is, which I don't know, to me, it's nonsense.
I think there's something interesting about this shift between the 20th and the 21st century. And the start of the 21st century has been so traumatic in so many ways that people haven't had the chance to just take a step back. And to Claudio's point, there's some people who have taken a step back. Now, whether you like him or not, Elon Musk is one of those people who's taken a step back and has said to himself, we're going to do business in a different way. We're going to go back to first principles. That's what he calls it. Steve Jobs did it before, and there's so many pioneers who are doing it now. And I think that thinking afresh is very hard to do over the last 2 decades because there's been so much noise going on. And I think sometimes thinking afresh requires you asking the question, why am I in this? And as soon as you ask that question and answer that question really honestly, why am I in this? Why am I going through this? What am I doing? What's my purpose, etc.? And which I know is a question that the entrepreneurship students ask all the time. As you know, to use the language that Claudio is using, the game changes. It's happened to me, and it's probably happened to me way too late in my life. But I think, you know, great to hear that you guys are asking that question. You may not know you're asking that question, but do ask that question if you're not. It's never too late. You know, we kind of parallel tracking the same point between myself and Claudio in that people have been doing commerce business in a certain way. They've become, you know, first time in history, there are business stars. Business people are celebrities. You know, that's a very weird, you know, Richard Branson, all of these people, they're celebrities now. You know, Victoria Beckham, she's become a celebrity. She was a celebrity and now has become a fashion designer. So there is a glorification of that. There is a glorification of that, and we need to be kind of aware of that and keep asking ourselves, go back, just step back, just sit back and have a hope, you know, a look at the whole picture. It just gives us a different perspective.
I would like to add something to answer also to you, Isadora. I think that independently of the generation, you know, the root cause is that, you know, actually we don't want to change. That's the base. It's very human, right? We have a resistance to change. But the funny thing is that life is about process of changing constantly, cyclically. So now, of course, because of everything that happened in different levels in the fashion industry, professionals have this resistance to change, even if we all know that what we have prior March 2020 is not going to come back. And the people that doesn't want to see that is the people that is in big trouble, right? because like I always said, I mean, you need to force yourself, and this is when creativity comes to rescue you. You need to force yourself to see doors where you were seeing walls before, you know? In times of crisis, there is this thing that we say in Italy, there's people that is crying and people that is selling Kleenex, right? So you need to find the key. So the structure of the fashion as a system, especially the one that was created 30 years ago, you know, is very dense, and it's not designed necessarily for emerging brands to succeed. That's another chapter that we can discuss for hours and hours. And it's not just in the fashion industry, it's in many industries. But I think that what Claudio also was saying, what we are observing, independently if it's design students or business students, is that this new generation have a different set of values, you know, a different set of wantings, you know. I was discussing this with a friend of mine that he is the head designer of Miu Miu, and he was telling me that he has these two colleagues that have small children, like 10 years old, 12-year-old children. And for Christmas, the mom were asking, what do you want for Christmas? And those kids were saying nothing. I already have a lot of stuff. And my friend had like an aha moment and said, I am not going to have a job soon because those generations are going to be consumers, you know? So now there is this young generations of no logo, less consumerism, less is more, blah, blah, blah. And fashion should pay very much attention to that. And soon, because they're here. They're going to be the consumers pretty soon. So going back to the root cause, you know, if we allow the change, embrace the change, it is scary, but you know, the uncertainty is a constant in our life. We have always uncertain, nothing is certain. You enter a job, you don't know how it's going to go. You start a relationship, you don't know how it's going to go. So it's an illusion, this thing of holding to what I know, right? So yeah, that's how I see it when it comes to part of the root of what is happening.
So for example, if young creatives that are, you know, newer generation of consumers also bringing their own values, how would you say that, what kind of mistakes are they making following the conventional systems of entering the market but also introducing the new values?
Well, I think, you know, first of all, mistakes is a great thing. let's say that. I encourage, and I think, you know, both Claudia and Habib will convey, you know, when you're an entrepreneur, it's about trial and error, right? So mistakes should be a constant in your life. You learn with mistakes. You don't learn with success. You learn with mistakes. So that's the first thing. When it comes to these new generations, at least, Isadora, they're trying. They're trying. They're taking risks. And of course, it's also because when you have a certain age, you are more fearless, right? But they are trying, and this is already a great thing. And if you follow your intuition, of course, I'm talking now about some spiritual approach, but you know, if you follow your heart, your intuition, not your ego, but what you really want to do, because your heart tells you that is the path. You know, we all have this internal compass. It always going to expand whatever you will do. And this is what I try to say to this emerging talents. I said, follow your intuition. You think this is the right thing? Even if everyone is telling you no, I tell you this for first experience. You know, when I start writing the book, you know, you can imagine I didn't say anything to anyone, because you need to go to what your intuition says and do not pay attention to the external noise, because otherwise that is going to condition big time your choices. But, you know, to answer your questions, I think that they're trying. First of all, I will tell them, don't worry about mistakes. It's perfectly fine. It's part of the game. And the more mistakes you do, the more you learn. And at one point, after an enormous amount of mistakes, you will finally learn and you will finally know, oh, this is what I should do. This is my purpose. This is my path. This is, you know, this is how I can give, I can contribute, you know?
Yeah, I mean, that's just great. It's fantastic, Farah. I mean, without overcomplicating it, I always say to the students that on the masters is know your story. Know your story, know the story of your brand, know what you're creating, know that first, and then if you want to copy others, great, no problem at all, because through copying you can actually get better and you can create your own voice. But if you don't know your own story, it's really hard, and that's the difficult bit. I can spot, just from instincts, because I've been working with brands so long, I can spot authenticity in brands so quickly. and the thing is, I was trained to do it 15, 20 years ago, but now the modern day audience are brand literate. So they don't need to have it explained whether a brand is authentic or not. The authentic brands actually know, well, you will know the authentic brands just from instinct, as an audience member. So, again, this is something that I don't need to teach anybody, but it's worth revisiting as a principle, is that, all the students on the masters, they've learned how to know their own story and to trust their own story, and then go from there, because you can't fake a story. You can't twist that into your business model. You have to have it whole. So the authenticity part is when people say, let's have an authentic brand, clients actually say that to us. We want to have a really authentic brand. Well, we say to them, we can't make you authentic. You have to be authentic. So just going off the back of what Farah is saying, which is so interesting, I'd say stick to that. Have a real sense of knowing what your story is.
And there's also another factor which I think that it's generational, and it's a good sign for fashion and for the industry in general, is that I see more and more young designers, young entrepreneurs willing to collaborate. They sort of learned that that fashion now, like never before, or maybe even before, but before it was not a knowledge. It's a matter of sharing ideas and sharing experiences, and it's not a one-man game. It's something that we do together to achieve higher grounds. And I think that even the model of competition that it's been instilled in fashion schools, in the industry, like I win, you lose kind of thing, I don't know, it's obsolete. And when the students show that, even a project like yours, it's an amazing proof of that, in which you exchange information instead of keeping them all for you, like it's a secret that if you share it, it loses its value. It multiplies instead. So that's the thing that give me hope for the future, and I don't know, make me go to work with a smile, and that's the thing I observe.
Yeah, we are moving towards a we culture. People have realized that we're social beings. We need each other. We need each other for everything. And it's beautiful when you see people coming together. We can create amazing things. And I think all of you demonstrate that.
There's an interesting example. I completely agree with what you're saying, Claudio and Marco. There's an interesting example, and we spoke to a client about it this week, actually. And the example is that there's a dish called chicken tikka masala. Okay, now in Britain, everybody thinks it's an Indian dish. You will never find it in India. But if you bring India and Britain together, you get chicken tikka masala, right? So nobody in India eats chicken tikka masala. It doesn't exist. Here in Britain, it exists because you've got, Bangladeshi and Indian restaurateurs for the last 50 years who have slowly evolved dishes to cater to British palates, and all of a sudden you've got this thing that didn't exist before. So if that's it's a culinary example, if you like, of something that this is how new ideas sometimes get created. You clash opposites together.
I like that example very much, and especially because, as we talked about, connecting to each other, exchanging knowledge, there has been a lot of conversations on mental health in the fashion industry. And Farah, you actually talk a lot about this, and I would love for you to tell us a little bit about your book, because your book touches the topic on spirituality. So please.
Thank you, dear. I'm not selling the book. Huh? It sounds like I'm selling the book. No, I'm not selling the book. Yeah, well, when it comes to the methodology of the book, it's something I created from a very simple a point of departure. When I was a designer, a fashion designer back then, in those hungry fashion days, like I call them in Milan, what kept me alive, it was the fact that I was very lucky to grow up in a very spiritual family. And spirituality has nothing to do with religion. It's the first thing that I always clarify. You can be a spiritual person and not believe in any religion, so it has nothing to do. But those techniques, that those ancient spiritual philosophies that exist in thousands of years have left us, and there's a reason if they still work today. Those well-being techniques were the one that kept me in balance somehow, or avoid me to going fully to burnout, which is linked to mental health issues, when I was a fashion designer. So at one point I said, I want people to avoid to pass through what I have to pass, right? So this is why I create this book. But when it comes to mental health, Isadora, which is another argument in the fashion industry, I can tell you what I said once that I was invited to this panel in London about creativity and mental health for the fashion industry. And I remember there was a lot of PhD doctors and mental health practitioners with a lot of titles, very impressive people. And there was like the room was full of fashion professionals, and they were talking about mental health issues, and you can see the faces of the professionals there. And I raised my hand in the panel and said, you've been speaking about depression for half an hour. Can you say what depression is? Because let's start from the basis. There is a lot of fashion professionals that they have depression. They don't know they have depression because they don't know what depression is, right? So I think, also the reason why, in a very humble way, I wanted to introduce this concept is because there is a lack of information, a sort of taboo about this concept in the fashion industry. But it's like Claudio was saying, it's a very fast-paced industry with a lot of a high stress level industry, right? So, health issues always come up in one way or another, because we're not machines, we're human beings. And I think the information is key. And yes, and this is what I hopefully try to do with my work, and also with what I write. Yeah, it's so necessary to avoid burnout and all those things that we know very well.
Yeah.
I would like to know also, how does that what you believe in translates in all of your work, working with people? So in your consultancy work, how does that look like? How do you approach brands that come to you with questions for help? How does the work process look like?
Well, going back to what we discussed at the beginning about the value system and everything, since I started my professional career, I always have very clear in mind my ethics and my values. Not always stick to them. I'm not perfect. I made a lot of mistakes, same as everyone. But because, again, I had that background of a spiritual practice, I believe in this. When people ask me what is spirituality, I always said common sense. I mean, you just and ethics is something that should be present in the fashion industry, because that is like a compass that guide you to make proper decisions, instead of just profit and all those, which is nothing wrong to want to earn money by selling your products and services, that's perfectly fine, but that cannot be the main motivator, right? And with the companies that I mentor, I try always to discuss with them, you know, what is their big reason why, what is their value systems, what are you know, the why, like Habib was saying, why you want to do a fashion brand in the first place. You know, be brutally honest with yourself. Do we need another brand? Do we really need another brand? Do we need more product? You know, nowadays. So you start from there and you try to be absolutely honest with yourself and coherent with yourself and set your scheme of values, and that will lead you to the scheme of priorities and your actions and so on. You know, in the book I speak about the heart-driven companies versus the fear-driven companies, right? So, and the difference between the first ones and the other ones. So what I try to mentor my clients always, or the students when I teach, is like, you know, the follow the path of the heart-driven company, right? And yes, and the spirituality in my case helps. There's many people that believe also and apply these philosophies, but again, if you stick to ethics, you don't have to apply, I don't know, the Tao philosophy, or, you know, Kabbalah or Buddhist or whatever, you know, that, you know, ethics is just perfectly fine as a starting point.
Personally, I sort of resonate with, obviously, Farah. We talk a lot about that in our friendly conversations, but also with what Habib will say. When I face new clients or when I work with clients, I never present myself like having the magic formula. There's no such thing, like there's no one way to design. There's not one methodology that you can teach. You can teach one of many methodologies. You can teach many methodologies, but it's what resonates with you. It's what attains to your values. It's what's relevant for you. And again, there's no need for more products. There's no need for other brands per se. And sometimes that's the trickiest. That's also professionally is the trickiest topic to face with the client, because they come to you like you had the answers. Well, I don't know, maybe I learned it through analysis and through like therapy myself, but it's a process of self-discovery. What works for you possibly works for others if you know it well and if you can manage that strength. Other than that, it's just like, it's, again, there's no formula. I have no recipe for success, which is good for everybody, at least.
Thank you for mentioning this, Claudio, and apologies for interrupting you. I was actually reading something that every 10 years our cells change. So we become a new person every 10 years. It's fascinating to realize that, because we often have this realization, for example, in our 20s, oh, but I want different things. I'm not the same person that I was before. And it happens every year. We become a new person, we evolve, and maybe the brand we initially wanted to do has nothing to do with making clothes. Maybe it's sharing your story, having a stronger why, helping people. It's at the core of every one of us, I believe.
It's an interesting word that was mentioned there from Claudio. It's relevance. Relevance is, I think, you know, a word I think that will become more and more interesting to everybody. You know, asking yourself what the purpose, you know, where you're leading, but also it defines. It will define, I think, what will happen in the next decade or so. Because, as I say, I think there's been so much noise for the last 2 decades, so much conflict, so much, you know, everything's in your face. And I think clarity will become a lot more sought after and desired, you know, in our lives, in our careers, but also if you're talking about fashion brands, then clarity and relevance, I think, will be far more interesting to consumers than ever before. I think it's interesting. There's brands like Arquette's coming up, and they're you know, espousing slow fashion. They're saying we're going to be about things that will last you for decades, and brands such as Patagonia, which are really interesting. They're saying, don't buy our goods, we'll repair, bring us your goods and we'll repair them. So bring us your old coat and we'll repair it. So there's an interesting question about relevance. You know, there's bigger issues in fashion going on out there. So how does fashion or any other area become relevant? You know, if you're a lawyer, how you can be relevant? If you're in the fashion industry, how are you going to become relevant? If you're in zoology, how are you going to become relevant? I also kind of mentor some kids in the local area, and that's the question I ask them. You know, when I ask them, so what do you want to do with your life? And they're kind of struck a little bit because they think I was going to ask them, what job do you want? And I said, but what do you want to do with your life? And that becomes a different question for them. And then you get an amazing conversation with children. When you ask the question, what do you want to do with your life? You know, becomes a different conversation. Well, maybe parents would ask, what job do you want to do? And we'll lead you down that path. So I think, you know, clarity, relevance, there's a purity of the approach that I think will emerge in the next few years and over the next decade.
Indeed.
Yeah, and I would like to add something, if you allow me. Of course, I agree with both Claudia and Habib. I think that it's also important to understand that because of everything that happened, okay, but not necessarily just for everything that happened in the last year and a half, but it was already that change going before. The needs and the wants have changed, you know, going back to what we discussed about the values and everything, the needs and the wants. And fashion is one of those industries that have pushed very much the wants, right? You know, if you buy that 3,000 bag from Gucci, you're going to be enough. You know, if you so the status thing and that, but that has changed because the period of introspection that we all have lived in the last year and a half, it doesn't matter what level of, you know, journey you're in your life, we all have passed through that introspection process. Our needs and our wants have completely changed, right? So going back to why an emerging a fashion designer, student, you know, that wishes to launch their brand or a business is to, you know, pay attention to the wants and the needs of the people, because you are going to make sure you're going to do a brand or a business for others, not for you, not to feed your ego, right? Because if you want to feed your ego, it's going to be very expensive, believe me, as a learning process. But if you have in mind, of course, you know, that you are doing stuff for others, you know, that is the right mindset to start with. You know, what I always said this to, you know, I have many friends that are already professionals with 20, 30 years of expertise. And they say, Farah, I want to write a book. Can you help me with this? Because I want to talk about this. And I said, look, my advice is that remember that books are for others, not for you. You know, it's a message that is for others. It's other people that is going to buy your book, same as it's other people that is going to buy your products and services. So have that in mind. So if the wants and the needs have changed big time, you know, pay attention to that and do not put yourself in that process of building a brand or a company because of your ego in order to become, you know, like Habib was saying, the celebrity, right? Because most likely that is not going to happen. What is going to happen is a lot of struggle, a lot of pain, a lot of frustration. So that is
a lot of no's being said.
Yeah, interesting, because also previously you talked about how challenging it is to adapt to change. So with what you've just told us and the fact that, you know, there's been a lot of change in the last year with COVID, and, you know, a lot of it has affected the fashion industry as well. Where do you see some kind of new opportunities starting that young creatives, or the needs, where are some new needs that need to be fulfilled?
You know, I'm very passionate about this subject about the last year and a half. I'll tell you why. I think there's a whole section of society who have become a little bit paralyzed by what's happened with COVID. And I have tried to get the message out there that this might be a once in a lifetime opportunity as well. You know, this might be just the time to take a moment, breathe, step back, understand what's going on in the world, etc., and galvanize ourselves. You know, understand how important the climate crisis is and environment crisis is, and understand what's happening with race relations is not superficial. This is it. Either we get it right now or we don't. So, I mean, that's just two examples, but I think that when this window closes, and it's closing very, very fast, you know, the vaccine is out there, people are so itching to get back. And I say, just slow down, because when this window closes, that opportunity might just go forever, because this might just be a once in 100-year experience. And it's been horrible, but also we've been blessed, because this is a time where we can actually step back and take this opportunity.
Thank you, Habib. I would like to ask you a question following what you said. Where do you see the fashion industry, the industry moving in 2021, and which opportunities do you see coming?
For me, Margaret?
Yes,
yeah.
yes, Habib, yes.
Yeah, I'm going to answer that question in a broader sense. I think that fashion is part of society. And so what am I seeing in society? What am I seeing in the zeitgeist? And I think the zeitgeist is really interesting right now. It's there's so many areas of flux. It's hard to grab hold of it, you know, hard to understand it. But I think that, as I said before, I think the idea of clarity, I think people are absolutely yearning clarity. I think people are absolutely yearning truth and clarity and simplicity and trust. You know, really simple things like that. Simply because they've been played with so often and so intensely over the last 2 decades. And so I say to anybody who's in any areas, and including fashion, just try and understand the zeitgeist. So that's my interpretation of the zeitgeist right now, but it might not be the right interpretation. I say go out there, find out what the zeitgeist is, and then become relevant to that, because it's a remarkable time. It's an incredible time right now. I mean, the other day, just think about this. The other day, Nancy Pelosi invited the family of George Floyd into Congress to talk about race justice. Think about that. This is 2021, and this is still an issue. So that's just one example. That's just one little example. You know, our Prime Minister is yesterday making tacit apologies for Islamophobia. 2021. So this is what I say, is that I think just to everybody in fashion, I would say, anybody in any area, just take a step back, understand what's going on in the zeitgeist, and grab hold of it.
Yes, indeed. And I think that from little signs, we see that the business model is sort of collapsing of the previous industry by the desperate attempts to, you know, stick to the past model. Look what everybody's talking on, like in business boards and stuff like that, about NFTs, for instance, which to me, it's a laugh. It's not meant to laugh. It's just like the last remnants of a system that doesn't know what to sell you anymore, and is trying the last resources of inventing needs, which though are not relevant, which are going to deflate as soon as they started. I'm not saying that the digital world is disappearing whatsoever. That's going to be vital for the future, but not in those terms. It's going to be about inclusivity. It's going to be about connections. It's going to be about relevancy. It's going to be about all the big words that we mentioned, but not about consumption per se, as it's been shown. Like Like yesterday, I was reading an article, they sold an NFT Gucci bag for $4,000, which to me, it's utter nonsense, but not just because I'm from another generation. I think it's just because, do we need that? Are we really that rich that we can, you know, that we have everything else in the world, including the immaterial goods that Farah is talking about, the material values that are vital? I don't think so. That's at least my take. Maybe I'll be wrong. I don't know, but I like to think I'm not.
No, I totally agree with you. And, you know, Habib, you said something that I think is key in these times, which is simplicity. I think that what 2020 gift us to all of us, and you are, locked down at home, you start seeing, your life, what I got my life into, and you start, we all have this need to, clean the house and clean the wardrobe and, take away all those extra weights we have put to ourselves, in many areas of our life. And when going back to this new generations that they're trying to build something new, if they start the process in a simple way and they pay attention to what life is telling you, because life is talking to us all the time. We are not paying attention, but the signs are there, very clear, So to pay attention to what life is telling you and how it's guiding you, and to understand that we need to take responsibility for what we have created, because this is something that I always say when it comes to the fashion industry, we are all responsible for the industry we have. We are all responsible, myself, all of us, as professionals, the ones that we are inside, and also as consumers, right? We have a huge power as consumers. So what I see that is very beautiful is to see those emerging brands, designers, and the students, that they are again falling in love with the craft, especially in Italy. We as Italians, we love our made in Italy, the real one, not the fake one that luxury companies sell, the real one, because it's a beautiful process. It's a beautiful craft based on tradition, based on values, based on heritage, based on family values many times. So to see those students or those designers that they are going back to those roots it's a good signal, I think, to go into the simplicity and the essence of things in the process. So I hope that is one of the many positive paths that can lead to real change in a way.
I would love to know if you have any experiences in working in different markets, so comparing the fashion industry in Italy and in London, in the UK and some other parts of the world.
I can talk to brands very briefly, across the globe, and I think that there's I think both Claudio and Farah hit upon a really interesting point. Does everybody know this program, Dragon's Den? It just feels so irrelevant now. This conflict, ridden idea, that we're going to make people nervous and quake in their boots, and business is so not that anymore. Yes, it's kind of scary and everything, but it's not that anymore. I think it's interesting for you guys to think about business and how you want to conduct business. It goes back to the work-life balance thing. I think that's a really interesting question. To answer your question, Isadora, across the globe, as far as brands are concerned, I think there's some really, really interesting things happening. I think that the European, North American dominance of brands has broken down over the last decade. If you just think about the film industry, the Korean and Indian film industries are outscoring Hollywood, for instance. So there's a lot of paradigm shifts that are happening. And I think you said it at the beginning, Isadora, I think it was you who said it, look out to the rest of the world. Some really interesting things happening. If you want to remain relevant, there's some nuggets and ideas and gems out there that I think will blow your mind if you just look for them.
I have a little history that at the time sort of made me really upset, but now I look at that with sort of, I don't know, it's somehow fun. It was the first lockdown we had in Italy, and everybody was obviously stuck at home and we couldn't work. And I was talking to some friends from the States, and they told me, oh, how lucky you are of not living in a capitalistic society. We're bound to go to work. And I was like, you know what? That's a weird vision of the thing. It's like I was not feeling lucky whatsoever, but I never saw myself of not being in a capitalistic society. I was like, it was just like different perspective. I think that, yes, what I see in Italy is, even here, I see that, I don't know, there's a global sense of this change, which is not bound to geography, but it's bound to, I don't know, the air that we breathe, the I don't know, the state of the matter in a way. And I think that if you tune in to that, you will see it yourself. I find a lot of resistance though, even in the education environment. Sometimes it's very hard to bring new models or to not to stick to the syllabus in a way that you had to plan ahead. I'd rather improvise. I think I got a little experience, not to improvise because I didn't prepare myself, but just because every day is different, and everything that I find, I teach every now and then classes of trend forecasting, and I'm sorry, can I say I couldn't give a shit about what happens tomorrow and the colors of the next season? I want to know where the shifts are, where the word is going, not where the colors for the next season, how much t-shirts in pink I can sell for winter. That is irrelevant to me. So, but it's very hard. I had to fight with my managers in the past to sort of, you know, change my programs because they wanted me to tell, okay, let's talk about prints, let's talk about the colors for the season, let's talk about which material is going to be popping in stores. And I was like, okay, you know, it's not my, again, it's not my game. I don't want to play it anymore.
Yeah. What about also, maybe I wanted to end these conversations also before we go to questions, a little bit, what were some of the things that, some ideas or concepts that have really inspired you in the last time, that can inspire everybody else by telling them?
I'd like to mention something that I think everybody would be inspired by. There's a group called the Intersectional Environmentalists. And I don't know whether you've heard of them. They're a group, North American group. And here's what I mean by relevance. Here's what inspires me about relevance, right? So they have recognized through their own experiences that they were cut off from experiencing the environment because they were, you know, they've lived in urban environments all their lives. Maybe a financial situation has cut them off from experiencing a mountain or experiencing a forest or experiencing the ocean or whatever it is. It's easy to connect to the environments when you have the means. So intersectional environmentalists are opening up that discussion in America. And I find that incredibly interesting and incredibly inspiring, because what they're saying is that, okay, you're right. We all should be taking responsibility. How do you want me to take responsibility if you're cutting me off from that experience? If you're cutting me off from that connection between myself and the trees around me, the ocean around me, even the negative elements like the wildfires and the dying coral around me. So I found that incredibly interesting. If you go on the website, they've written a letter to President Biden, incredibly well worded, and they've got a couple of videos on YouTube. I think that's what I mean by relevance. That's a group who are looking beyond their own sphere and understanding that there's bigger challenges and bringing it back to their own discipline, bringing it back to their own skill set. So check them out. If if it inspires you, wonderful, because it's inspired me.
I've just linked their website in the chat. I think I've got the right one. And I've seen Georgie has been very busy sharing your contacts as well. And we welcome you to please join us and ask your questions. I noticed that at the beginning there was a question waiting from Reem. Do you still feel like asking your question? Please join us.
Hello.
Hi.
Hi, Claudio, and hi, Farah. It's nice to see you too.
Hi, Reem.
How's everything?
You hi.
Very good.
Habib, nice to meet you. Just going to give a brief introduction before I ask my question. My name is Reem. I live in Egypt, and I have a small startup that's going into a business, a footwear brand. I studied interior architecture design, and then I worked in this field, and then I did my master's, and this is where I met Claudio and Farah in luxury business. And then as soon as I came out of my master's, I went back to my architecture field. And while I was doing my architecture work, I started this footwear brand. And then I think you asked in between if it's necessary to have a background or relevant to what you are working in. And personally, I see it now. It's very important to have understanding of the business, like how a business is actually being run and who is responsible for what, and taking the decisions and being ethical about your employees and about the product that you put in the market. Because as you said, the market is full of products. So why should you be there, or why should I buy your brand? And now during Corona, I discovered that a lot of people are talking about sustainability. And I just wonder if this is a trend. Like, is this a way that people are trying to attract customers? Because for me, this would be very not ethical. You know, like you are in the middle of a problem, or not a problem, it's a crisis that we're all in it. And we're all facing, of course, like sales and business problems, and then suddenly talk about sustainability. And I see it as a trend. I'm not sure if it's gonna last or not, but this is where I feel like comes also the trust issue with the brand. So do you see it as a trend, or is it something that actually brands are going to commit to it?
You want to answer, Claudio, or?
I think that, like, we had a pre-conversation before opening this open one, and I think that you're right. For many brands and for many parts of the industry in general, not only fashion, that is a trend. Like, what should we be tapping next? What is the trend topic today? Let's do sustainability. But we know that it comes with trust. We follow you, we know what you're doing. I do personally trust your honesty in your work and in your project. And I think that stands at the base of everything, I think.
It feels like a hype. I don't know if you see it also that way or not.
It's definitely a hype in the way it's promoted and portrayed, but I think that that it's going to last. It's going to last. You cannot go back from it in a way.
Okay.
So even the ones that do not fully believe it, but they just say it because they have to, eventually they will have to adapt to a word that is changing, and they will give that as a new standard in a way. And I'm dealing with, like, family-wise and personally, like with international companies that they say they're interested in it, but in sustainability, they're not doing a jiff of anything about it. But they make big proclaims on the press. They will have to come to terms with the lies eventually, and people already knows that, and they pointing fingers, and the king is naked.
Yes, and something that I would like to add to that, Reem. Well, first of all, Reem has a beautiful brand. Check it. So you can put the site, because that is one of those examples of brands that she actually started from the heart, because actually she saw this laboratories of amazing craftsmanship when it comes to shoemaking in Egypt, and she wanted to give work to these people, and she started the brand from that. So that, and your brand is being very successful to be a small brand, Reem. So when it comes to sustainability, something that I would like to add to that, and it's also to answer the last question of Isadora, and maybe this is an insight that it could be helpful for, you know, small, medium brands. It's about community. That is the energy that is shifting big time. It's about community. What you guys are doing here with the fashion clinic, it's a community. So you don't have to have like huge market. You have to have a tribe that follows you, that believes in your values. And I recommend, of course, a book that me and Claudio love, which is from Seth Godin, Tribes. You know, I'm sure Habib also know it. So it's about community. So your clients are like a family, like a extended family. This is how things are shifting. It's not anymore like a huge amount of people that buy your products. You need to have like a great group of loyal customers, followers that believe in what you're doing. And I think, Reem, from what I see, you know, it always opens my heart to see in Instagram everything you do, because you have that, you have achieved that. And believe me, the big brands that are doing the sustainable greenwashing thing, they are going to lose more and more those customers, because people is shifting into, I want to buy products from someone that shares my values. I want to buy services from someone that is a like-minded individual like me. So like Claudio was saying, the king is naked. You cannot fake it anymore. You know, so I think that type of sustainability is here to stay, because the energy is shifting into community connection and, you know, from bottom to top, not anymore from top to bottom, right?
Okay, it's good to know. Thank you.
Yeah, Reem, I couldn't agree more with those guys. It's fantastic. You know, your question is really good though, because what you're talking about is cynicism. You're talking about the cynical brands out there that will always go, how am I going to be relevant on a surface level? And that's really interesting that you're bringing that out and asking that question. And I say, turn that question into an advantage for yourself and for your business, because the authentic, you know, going back to relevance and authenticity, the authentic brands in this area who are making sustainability central to their premise, those brands, in my opinion, I think will stick around. I think will be there in the long term. And also don't be afraid. Don't be afraid to think small. I'll tell you what I mean by that. Sometimes it's not a bad thing to have 5 years where you are only, you know, selling to a certain amount of customers and gaining followers and fans. Going back to Farah's point, creating a community. Don't be afraid of that. That's more valuable than you think. I worked on a brand called Corn a long time ago. You know it. It's a Quorn. It's a vegetarian brand, right? And for years, for probably 20, 25 years, it was a very, very small community of fans. It was such, you know, and it didn't need to advertise. It just ran by itself because it had its fans. And I would say the same to you, is that you know, when you're trying to find your voice, just, you know, don't worry about being small, but worry about being relevant and genuine. That's the thing to do. There are the cynical brands out there, and they'll get found out. They'll always get found out by customers. Consumers are smart.
It's very nice advice. Thank you.
Thank you for these answers. I also would love to welcome anybody with their questions. If you are struggling with something in your building your business, now is your opportunity to ask questions.
We're very lucky to have an incredible panel with us. You can take this opportunity.
Yeah, please join our community. We are very excited to welcome people, hear your thoughts, hear your problems, so that we can solve them together.
Can I ask a question?
Yeah.
To everybody else, I'd like to ask the question, what's my generation missing? What's my generation missing from the narrative that's out there right now? Because, you know, I constantly try and find that, you know, that's narrative in the zeitgeist, but, you know, it's getting harder and harder at my age. So I'd love to know what's out there right now that's really relevant to you guys.
Hi, can I ask a question?
Yes, please.
Thank you. Hi, good morning. My name, well, you see, is Marta. I am from Mexico. I'm a fashion designer, but I'm not sure if I don't want to do design. I would like to do research, but I don't know. Well, in my country, this is not very common. So I am like thinking about starting something, or, well, I am having my doubts, or maybe studying a master's degree or something like that. So I feel like I'm stuck. I graduated at December 2019 when the COVID started. So it has been a mess and a whole emotional and confusing thing. So I don't know, I would like to ask for an advice or your opinion, or what do you think is a good way to proceed? I love what you just said, Habib, about don't worry about being like small, just being relevant, and all your perspective about, well, and don't worry to start little and grow little by little. But yeah, I would like to ask for my specific case. What do you think? Thank you so much.
Research is, you know, incredibly needed. I think you're from Mexico, right, Martha? And you're saying that it's not so prevalent or common to have research companies there. Fantastic. That's a need. I think that, you know, Mexico as a country is growing in stature. It's interesting. If you've ever watched Ugly Delicious or anything like that on Netflix, you'll know that there's so many interesting things happening in Mexico. I say grow your community and get yourself out there and say to people, I'm a researcher and I'm a good one. And what can I research for you? What is it that interests you? What are the stories that you want to tell? And how can I research those stories and bring them back to you in a relevant fashion? That it's actually quite interesting when things aren't common in a particular country, because actually you've got a space to open. You know, you've got open space to kind of enter into, if that makes sense. It's exciting.
Can I add something, Marta, that maybe can be helpful in the line to what Habib is saying? I collaborate many years ago with WGSN, which is a trend research agency in the fashion industry. And, you know, like Habib is saying, you know, I always, when I was there, they were very much interested in researchers from overseas, you know, from, for example, they may be interested, not just WGSN, but the Stylus or whatever, you know, all those trend research agencies that you have in Europe, they definitely are interested to the research you can do in Mexico, because as Habib is saying, it's a very interesting melting pot of ideas and movement. So creating bridges it's something that is very, very positive, and it always brings good. And so if you start, you know, collecting information, useful information for the fashion industry of this, you know, innovative processes that you find in Mexico, and you contact these agencies and you say, like, look, I'm a researcher, I would like to, you know, to contribute with you with, you know, what I can find in Mexico, I'm sure they will be super open to discuss with you. And not necessarily you need to do a master for that. You need to start doing it and have fun, you know, and that's all. I mean, a master, you know, always when I get this question, Prof, should I do a master after? Not necessarily. If you have very clear what you want to do, just start doing it. You don't need the master to validate what your heart knows that wishes to do. Start doing it, right?
And also, if I may, Marta, I used to, I had thoughts for like conferences and for brief periods in Mexico, in Mexican universities. And I think that this is the right moment for you to, maybe it might be a gut feeling and like sort of in a sense of fear because of the pandemic, but maybe you have an intuition, as Farah was saying, and the moment is right. I think Mexico is like definitely on the verge of becoming, of finding new things, and maybe you will be the lead for that. So make bridges, even think, one thing that a lot of fashion designers, they're very reluctant to do is think outside fashion. You know, your contribution, your vision, your sensitivity can be applied to many, many industries. So do not stick only to clothes and accessories and underwear and whatever you have been majoring in. Like, think about what your sensitivity can bring to other worlds. And I've seen amazing fashion designers get into the food industry and make huge success because of their background. Fashion, vice versa, it's a very inclusive in terms of it's a vampire, and you know, like they like, in fact, in the architecture industry, it's always been weird that I was doing fashion, but in fashion, I remembered my first gigs and my first jobs. It was like, oh, how interesting! You're an architect. Bring your expertise. Bring your vision. You know, so you know, think across. It's another suggestion.
Yes. So maybe I don't know, I should knock more doors. I already talked with two persons from WGSN, but they say like, oh no, we are interested like in people who speak Portuguese in Latin America. So maybe I should try to learn Portuguese. I've been trying to knock doors, but this is a very valuable.
There are many, Marta. There are many, not just WGSN. There are a lot of amazing trend research companies out there, agencies. You know, you just do a research. You're a researcher, so do a research in all the trend research companies that you find. And as Claudio was saying, cross-contamination. So not just fashion trend research agencies, you know, food, for example. When it comes to what I know is their companies are very interested in both Mexico and Colombia when it comes to research is jewelry. So, you know, try to do a research in what companies are, you know, searching for that type of information.
Yes.
Martha, I think there's 26 people on this call right now. If you were to connect to them all and present an article on a piece of research that you really feel passionate about, that's 26 people who are immediately going to know what you're about.
Thank you so much. Yeah, I also started writing articles, so maybe I can share my profile and I will be very thankful if you could read, well, maybe an article I'm close to publish about. Well, yes, thank you so much for this space. Well, I contact you, I will let you see my face. So nice to meet you. And well, hope to see you soon.
I would like to go back to your questions. What is relevant? Because I think we're pretty much the same age. I might be older, but anyway, just
you are younger.
You guys, what is relevant for you guys, like teachers?
Oh, seriously, serious question. Anybody, please come forward with, you know, Claudia is absolutely right. One of the reasons we're here is because we want to learn as well.
I can.
No, go.
I can relate to it, not so much because I'm also old, I'm not very young. But I think the internet is something that's making a huge change, or it has a very loud voice. Like an image can change everything. It can say so much, I think, than what used to be before. I also think that it's not necessarily, and correct me if I'm wrong, to have the education. It's more of, you can teach yourself. You don't need to go to this major, to this school anymore. You can teach yourself, make it a mission, make it a habit, and have also a lot of talks and experience, and always be curious to ask, to reach out. I feel like before, people not used to be shy, but there wasn't that much of interaction and way of communicating and platforms. That's my personal change.
Interesting.
I see Stacia also has her hand up. Please, Stacia.
I do.
Thank you for joining.
I don't. Hi, Habib. This has been really great, by the way. Well done, guys. I don't entirely disagree with Reem. However, it's difficult for me to say that because I'm the course leader of the, the Fashion Entrepreneurship and Innovation course. But yes, I mean, I definitely think, the only way you're really going to learn is by doing, and it doesn't necessarily mean that you need to get your master's or any type of special education in anything. I mean, I started 2 of my fashion businesses before I even had an undergraduate degree. I mean, I initially dropped out of an undergraduate degree and then went on to work in marketing in New York City and had a career before the recession hit, and then a degree was a prerequisite to even get a job. So I ended up going back and long story short, kind of making my way to the position that I'm in now. And you're absolutely right. It is just about doing. I mean, when I did all of those things, I learned on the job. When I started up my businesses, I didn't have any kind of design background. I just did it. And, back in those days, I'm going to show my age here, Google, and I mean, Google existed, but it wasn't the Google that we have now. I think it might have even been called Ask Jeeves at the time. But there's so many resources out there available. And if you have a true entrepreneurial spirit, you'll just figure out a way to do things. However, I will make the case that formal education does bring so many things to you for a sense of accomplishment. I'd never felt more accomplished than when I finished my, final master's project and received, my merit for that. I was so proud of myself. And I think there's something to that. There's also something to the connections that, educational, universities have. There's doors open, and you have access to a lot of different people, and particularly in the fashion industry, when you have London College of Fashion on your CV or even on your LinkedIn, it does open a lot of doors. So I definitely see both sides to that. And I do think that education is is changing. Sustainability is at the forefront. I know that was a big topic at the beginning of this discussion. How do we change the game? Well, education is how you change the game. And I don't necessarily mean higher education, but if you're not getting it through higher education, where else are you going to get it? Because it's just not being talked about enough on other levels. So yeah, I'm sorry. That was my meandering sort of defense of education.
If I may, Stacia, I do agree with you on everything, and I wouldn't trade my many years spent studying and my even odd educational experiences from the past. But as an educator right now, I think that what we're seeing is that the model of education has to evolve with the world. It doesn't mean to the lower standards, but to change the cross-contamination to be more fluid in a way, and to respond and obviously to provide the knowledge, the academic knowledge, but also to be sort of responding to the times which are changing. And sometimes I still honestly see a lot of resistance.
100%. I couldn't agree with you more. Our course is designed, I mean, you can ask these guys, Isadora and Margot, and there's a couple of the other students. We don't even call them students, we call them team entrepreneurs on the course. And when they come on the course, I'm sure they all think it's very weird because nothing about our course is traditional. We don't teach, we don't lecture. It's about building a team. It's about building a community of practice. And I think it came up earlier as well about having a tribe, about building this community, about building, and that's exactly what we do on the course. It's all centered around learning by doing, learning from each other, sharing experiences, sharing knowledge. And yeah, so I couldn't agree more, Claudio. And I do think that education 100% needs to change and go more in the direction of self-determined learning, and rather, the students go away, do their own work, and then come in and talk about what worked, what didn't work, what they'll take away from it, and sort of having a better understanding of how they could do things differently if things didn't work, and iterating and researching and being more curious, and all of that, because education, traditional education seems to take that away, that curiosity and that creativity and that thinking differently.
I think your program, the students in your program or the entrepreneurs in your program are very lucky. So
yeah, we've had a wonderful year. I'm sorry to also disturb. I want to say that Habib informed me he has to leave, so we wanted to say a nice goodbye. People are more than welcome to stay and ask more questions if the other panelists would like to, who have time to stay, but we definitely hope that you all connect with us on social media, on Instagram. We have our own website. You can subscribe to our newsletter. And thank you so much for all three of you to really, join us and share your stories. It really means a lot that you were willing to do that.
Simply enjoyed it. Thank you very much for inviting me. I hope I'm not disturbing you guys. Please carry on if you want to. I do have to go, but I wanted to say goodbye in the right way. What a fantastic initiative. Well done, everybody. Thank you very much for including me.
Thank you so much, Habib. Have a lovely evening.
Good guys. Bye-bye.
Thank you, Habib. Bye.
Bye, Habib. No, it was a pleasure to participate, and unfortunately I have to also leave. So, but it was great to meet you, Habib, and to meet all of you. And if you guys have more questions, I mean, you can contact me or via social or in my website. I will be happy to answer your questions without problem. So we're here to continue the discussion in other platforms as well, worry not. And And Isadora, thank you so much for inviting me. And thank you for the lovely team. It was a pleasure to share this moment, this space with you.
It really was.
Thank you. We will wrap up now.
Thank you. Also, like, I just wanted to say thank you to everybody. I'm very happy that, and also on a personal level, like, thank you, Margot, but also on a personal level, thank you to Isadora, who's been a student of mine, and it's been a pleasure to meet her at the times in school, and now it's a pleasure again to see her with such dedication and such commitment to new projects, and that's what we all look for when we do this job as educators. So yes, thank you really from the bottom of my heart. It makes my day.
Thank you. And thank you everybody for joining us.